They said I was a bride who glowed with hope. They said my wedding day would be the beginning of forever, and in the eyes of the world I was radiant, my gown pure, my smile unshaken, my future promising. But on that same day, as I walked past the church steps with rice still falling in my hair, I saw them, 3 children in rags, eyes hollow, bellies empty, hands trembling in the cold, their faces carved into my soul like shadows etched into stone. That moment should have been a celebration of new beginnings, but instead, it chained my life to a choice that would echo for decades. I reached out to them, I took them in, and 25 years later, when the world branded me guilty, when prison walls swallowed me whole, those same children were the only ones who could save me. Before I tell you how one act of kindness became the sentence of my life, subscribe right now. If you don't, imagine waking up one day to betrayal you never saw coming, with no one left to fight for you. Comment your city below. I'll see who dares to stand in the light and who hides in silence. My name is Elizabeth. On the morning of my wedding, I believed in forever. The church bells sang. Friends and family clapped as I walked down the aisle. My groom, Liam, stood tall, his smile wide, his future tied to mine. We were young, we were ambitious, we were convinced love could weather anything. The reception was laughter, music, the shimmer of glasses raised to our new life. I thought I had stepped into a fairy tale. But fairy tales, as the wise say, are written in delicate glass, easy to shatter, impossible to mend. And mine cracked the moment I stepped outside the church doors. That's when I saw them. 3 children standing in silence, their clothes torn, their feet bare against the pavement. No one else looked their way. Guests hurried to their cars. My new husband pulled at my hand, urging me toward the waiting limousine. But their eyes followed me. Isaiah, the oldest, stared with a defiance that broke under the weight of hunger. Naomi, the little girl, clutched a torn doll with no eyes, rocking back and forth, and Caleb, the youngest, barely spoke. His lips were cracked, his gaze lost, as though he'd already forgotten how to hope. My heart refused to move past them, and in that moment, still wearing my wedding dress, I stepped forward. I knelt before them. I asked their names. Liam's voice cut through, sharp and impatient. "Elizabeth, come on, we don't have time for this." But I silenced him with a single glance. I was a wife now, but I was still me. And me, I couldn't leave them behind. I brought them home. 3 beggar children, with nothing but the weight of their hunger, now sat at my table in their ragged clothes, staring at plates of food as though they had never believed such a thing could be theirs. Isaiah devoured his meal quickly, his eyes darting as though someone might steal it from him. Naomi whispered, "Thank you," with a trembling voice that carried more gratitude than I had ever heard in words. Caleb, the youngest, ate in silence, staring at me as if trying to decide whether I was real or just another dream that would vanish come morning. My husband, Liam, sat across from them. His fork clinked against his plate. His smile was forced, and when our eyes met, I saw his displeasure sharpen into something I chose, then, to ignore. That night, I tucked Naomi into a bed she did not believe was hers. She held her faceless doll tightly and whispered, "Will we stay here tomorrow too?" My heart broke, and I said words I intended to keep. "Yes, you will stay. You are mine now." What I didn't know was that those words would one day be used against me in a court of law. Days turned into weeks. I enrolled the children in school, bought them clothes, taught them how to pray before meals. Slowly their laughter filled the house. Their hunger gave way to growth. Their eyes, once hollow, now shimmered with the beginnings of trust. I loved them as fiercely as if they had been born from my own body. But love, my love, came at a cost. Liam's resentment grew. He wanted a wife who followed his every plan, not one who rewrote them. He wanted children with his blood, not 3 hungry orphans pulled from the street. At first he said nothing. Then came the sighs, then the arguments, then the threats whispered when he thought they were sleeping. "You've ruined our marriage, Elizabeth. You've brought shame into this house. Stray dogs eat from our table now, and you call it charity." But I never bent. I told him what I believed then with every piece of my soul. Better to share bread with the forgotten than to eat a feast built on cruelty. I didn't know it yet, but he would remember those words, and when his chance came, he would make me pay for them. Would you have done the same? Would you have opened your doors, even if it meant risking your marriage, your reputation, your future? Or would you have turned away? Subscribe right now and tell me your city. If you don't cry later when you face betrayal alone, with no one left to fight for you. The house had changed. Where once it had echoed only with the laughter of a wedding celebration, it now rang with the quiet rhythms of a household built on survival. Isaiah was quick to adapt, protective beyond his years, often standing in the doorway when Liam's sharp words cut too close. Naomi still trembled at loud voices, but found courage in the tiny victories of school and homework. Caleb, the youngest, began to smile again, a fragile thing that blossomed slowly. And yet, my husband's resentment was like an invisible storm cloud over the kitchen, over the living room, over every dinner we shared. He wanted a home without disruption, a life measured in profit, appearances, and control. Every night I watched him in the dim light of the study, reviewing his business documents, his phone buzzing constantly with messages I dared not read. I wondered if he noticed the children, if he noticed me, if he ever noticed that my love had saved lives that would have otherwise faded into darkness. Arguments began to erupt over small things. Isaiah accidentally broke a vase, and Liam's voice snapped across the room like a whip. How hard is it to keep children from destroying everything? My hand tightened around my teacup. I did not speak. I only remembered the hungry eyes outside the church that morning. I remembered the faces of children who had nowhere else to turn. And yet, he began to isolate me from my own choices. Friends noticed, neighbors whispered. Some, in hushed tones, warned me that I had overstepped. But what they didn't understand was that kindness cannot be measured by approval, and love, the kind I carried in my heart, cannot be reduced to convenience. The tension grew, unspoken yet undeniable. Liam began taking longer trips, claiming business, though I suspected other women. Phones disappeared from sight. Secrets were whispered in rooms where I was not allowed, and the children, who had once been afraid of everything, now feared something else, the quiet resentment of a man who once promised love. I began to write in a journal, not for anyone but myself, every suspicion, every conversation, every odd detail. I recorded times, names, patterns. I chronicled every smile that felt false, every whisper that hinted at betrayal. And slowly, a realization began to take root. The man I built a life with was not the man I thought I knew. He had become a stranger. One day, I caught a glimpse of a message flashing on his phone, a name I didn't know. My stomach tightened, my hands shook. The children, sensing my tension, huddled close. Naomi whispered, "Mom, is he going to hurt us?" I had no answer, only a promise to myself that whatever came, I would not fail them. That night, as I tucked them in, I kissed each forehead and said words that I would carry with me for years. I will protect you, always, no matter the cost. And it was at that moment, in the quiet of the night, that I knew my fight was only beginning. Do you believe love protects you? Or do you understand that sometimes the people closest to you can be the ones who betray you first? Subscribe now and tell me your city. If you don't, imagine waking one day to betrayal with no one left to save you. It was a quiet evening. The children were asleep, their breaths even and soft in the darkened rooms. I sat alone in the living room, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator. Liam's phone, left carelessly on the kitchen counter, vibrated once, twice, then went silent. Curiosity stirred, though I knew the answer I feared. I picked it up, and there it was. A string of messages, words that cut deeper than any blade could. Candace, meetings, secret dinners, plans whispered in code, promises made to replace me, to erase me from the life I had built with my own hands. My world contracted, my chest tightened. Every memory, every day I had devoted to love and family, felt as though it were being stripped away in a single instant. I sank to the couch, my hands trembling as I read and reread the messages. I did not cry at first. I only sat there, staring at the glowing screen, the weight of betrayal pressing on me like 1,000 stones. Then the tears came, silent, uncontrollable. But even through them, a strange clarity emerged. This was not the time for despair. Not tonight. Not ever. I wiped my cheeks, straightened my back, and whispered to the empty room, "You think you can break me. You think you can take everything, but you have no idea who you are dealing with." That night I buried my tears. I buried the pain. And from that burial something else arose. Determination. Rage, yes, but more than rage. Strategy. Resolve. Power I had never yet allowed to surface. In the following days I observed every move, recorded every habit, noted every lie. I began tracing financial records I had once ignored. I opened doors in places Liam had assumed I would never enter. Every whisper of his deceit became a brick in a path I would walk alone, until the right moment arrived. And yet, even as the anger simmered, I did not forget the children. Naomi, Isaiah, Caleb, sleeping safely, unaware of the storm gathering. They were my reason to endure. They were my reason to plan with precision. By the time Liam thought I was broken, I was far from it. I was alive in a way he could never understand, ready for a reckoning that he could never escape. Have you ever discovered the truth too late? Imagine realizing betrayal in the quiet of night, when everything you trusted crumbles before your eyes. Subscribe now and drop your city in the comments. If you don't, just know that silence in the face of treachery is a decision, and one day it will cost you. I realized that anger alone would not undo what had been done. I needed someone who could see the pieces I could not, someone who could follow the threads of deception where I could only feel their weight. That's when I found Janet, a private investigator, seasoned, relentless, unafraid of the shadows people hid behind. I did not tell Liam. I did not ask for permission. I only handed Janet the fragments I had collected, the messages, the late-night whispers, the strange patterns in bank accounts, and said simply, "Find the truth, no matter where it leads." Janet's eyes were sharp, trained. She nodded, and I saw in her a reflection of my own determination. In that moment, I understood something essential. Power was not given. It was taken, carefully, strategically, ruthlessly, if necessary. Over the following weeks, Janet uncovered what I had feared and what I had suspected. Hotel meetings in cities I had never visited, dinner reservations in the dead of night, financial transfers that vanished into the shadows, hidden accounts that Liam thought I would never find. Every detail she brought me was a piece of a puzzle that had, until now, been invisible. I studied each photo, each receipt, each account number. I memorized patterns, learned routines, understood the web of lies Liam and Candace had spun around themselves, and through it all, I remained calm. I smiled when Liam spoke to me, attended events at his side, carried on as if nothing had changed. Because proof is power, and power, when wielded in silence, becomes a weapon sharper than any words could ever be. The children watched me carefully, though they did not yet know the full extent of my plan. Naomi asked quietly one evening, "Mom, are you scared?" I shook my head. Scared is for those who cannot act. We do not fear what we can prepare for. And while Liam slept, Oblivious to the storm gathering in every corner of his empire, I began building my blueprint. Every vulnerability catalogued, every opportunity identified, every secret stored where only I could reach it. The truth had been delivered to my hands, and the next steps were mine to choose. Do you think truth alone protects you? Or do you understand that knowing the truth is just the first step? Action is what saves you. Subscribe now and tell me your city. If you don't, one day you may wake to betrayal, and the people you trusted most will be the ones who watch and do nothing. With Janet's findings laid before me like a map of enemy territory, I began my work. Every bank account Liam controlled, every joint venture he had thought secure, every hidden debt he had counted on no one noticing, I catalogued them all. I studied patterns, predicted movements, and quietly opened doors he assumed were locked. I made calls to lawyers, setting in motion structures he could never trace. I created accounts in names he would never suspect. I left no signature, no hint, no clue that pointed back to me. Liam believed I spent my nights in sorrow, that I was consumed by heartbreak. But in the quiet corners of our home, I was orchestrating a downfall more precise than any anger-fueled strike could ever be. Every document I touched, every transaction I initiated, was a calculated step, not a whim, not revenge for revenge's sake, but a reclamation of what had been stolen from me, my dignity, my children, my life. And as I mapped his vulnerabilities, I began to understand something essential. The man who had built an empire thought he was untouchable, but I had become the one he underestimated. Power does not scream its arrival. It waits, it watches, it moves in silence. And by the time it strikes, the target is already trapped. I returned home each night, greeted by the laughter of the children I had saved, unaware that their mother was weaving the threads of justice that would one day free them from the shadow of his deceit. Naomi asked me why I never seemed angry anymore. I smiled, held her hand, and whispered, "Anger without action is useless. What matters is what you do next." Isaiah, ever vigilant, sensed the change in me. He did not question it aloud, but in his eyes I saw respect, fear, and a quiet hope. Caleb, the youngest, touched my shoulder as I worked late into the night, and I promised him, without words, that nothing, no betrayal, no injustice, would ever claim us again. The pieces were in place, every trap carefully laid, every opportunity calculated. And soon, the world that had underestimated me would learn exactly who I had become. If you think love alone protects you, you're already in danger. Subscribe right now and tell me your city. If you don't, imagine waking one day to find the people you trusted most have handed your life over to someone else, and no one is there to save you. By day, I was the picture of a devoted wife. I smiled at Liam, attended events at his side, cooked meals that filled the home with warmth, and laughed when friends told me how lucky I was. I carried myself as if nothing had changed, as if the betrayal I knew about was a shadow that had passed me by. But behind that smile, every document I had secured was ready to strike. Every account I had opened, every lawyer consulted, every secret I had uncovered, all of it was part of a plan that no one, not even Liam, could see coming. I became a master of duality. The loving, gentle wife in public, the calculating strategist in private. Every word I spoke was measured, every reaction carefully crafted, and yet, the children remained my anchor. Isaiah, Naomi, and Caleb continued to grow under my protection, never knowing the danger that loomed just beyond the surface of our lives. Each night, I reviewed my strategy. I checked numbers, recalculated risks, and rehearsed the timing of each move. I could feel the moment approaching, the point when the world would finally understand that the woman they had underestimated was not just unbroken. She was unstoppable. Candace, the other woman, believed she had already won. She smiled at Liam in ways I remembered from our early days, whispered words of ambition and desire, and thought she was untouchable. She did not know she was merely a piece in a game she could never control. I observed her carefully, noting every habit, every insecurity. Every overconfidence she displayed was an opportunity. Every smile she wore to replace mine was a step toward her undoing. Liam thought he was safe, surrounded by people who admired him and feared me. He did not see that the strongest weapon in any war is patience. And in patience, I thrived. In silence, I plotted. In calm, I prepared to unleash a storm that would change everything. Sometimes the most dangerous power is hidden behind a smile. Subscribe now and tell me your city. If you don't, imagine the people you trust laughing at you while your life slips quietly from your hands and no one stands to stop it. Janet's work had revealed more than I could have imagined. Candace moved like a shadow in Liam's life, confident, manipulative, and utterly convinced she could replace me. She whispered promises into his ear, flattered his ego, and slowly inserted herself into the life we had built together. Yet every whispered word, every calculated move, every smirk she believed concealed her ambition, was visible to me. Every secret meeting she arranged, every late-night conversation, every document she assumed Liam would never show me, was tracked, catalogued, and stored. She thought she was untouchable. She believed that the crown of our home could be hers, but in truth, she was a pawn in a game she could not comprehend. Every step she took toward power brought her closer to a downfall she would never see coming. Liam, blinded by desire and arrogance, did not notice how easily I had begun to control the strings around us. He believed Candace's whispers, her presence, her promise of something new could overwrite years of shared history. He did not see the trap I had carefully built, nor the patience I had cultivated. And in the quiet of our home, while the children slept peacefully, I allowed myself a moment of grim satisfaction. The woman who thought herself my replacement was entirely unaware that the foundation of her plans rested on sand, and I held the tides. Every move Candace made, every advance, every flirtation, was now a part of the evidence I could wield. I tracked her footsteps, her calls, her subtle lies, and stored them for the moment when truth would no longer be denied. And as I prepared for the day she would finally believe victory was hers, I reminded myself of the lesson that had guided every step of my journey. Power is not claimed through arrogance. Power is claimed through precision, patience, and preparation. Candace's rise was my signal, Liam's blindness my opportunity, and the world would soon bear witness to the truth in a way neither of them could imagine. What would you do if someone thought they could take your place, your life, your power? Subscribe now and comment your city. If you don't, imagine watching the people who betray you smiling as they take everything you built and no one stops them. The night of the anniversary party arrived like any other. Sparkling lights, flowing champagne, soft music drifting across the room. But beneath the elegance, every moment was a trap waiting to be sprung. Guests arrived in gowns and tuxedos, laughter and chatter filling the air. No one suspected the tension that hovered just beneath the polished veneer of celebration. They did not know that every movement, every glance, every smile would soon be overshadowed by a revelation that could not be unseen. Liam believed he had planned this evening perfectly. He had brought Candace boldly, certain I would remain composed, certain I would be humiliated. He did not see the calm in my eyes, the subtle shift in posture, the patience in my breath. He thought the game was his. He thought the night would cement her place and break me forever. I raised my glass, smiling at friends, speaking words that felt light, but carried the weight of a storm. Guests whispered behind their hands, unsure of what they were witnessing. The room pulsed with expectation, though no one knew what was coming. Candace lingered near Liam, flattered by her own audacity, confident in the illusion she had created. She did not see me watching, recording, calculating. She did not see that her every action, every laugh, every whispered word was being noted. Every step she took was drawing her closer to the revelation I had prepared. And then, the moment came. A subtle signal I had planted weeks before, a message to Janet, the photographer, a discreet legal notice tucked into plain sight, was triggered. The entire room did not yet understand, but the pieces were moving into place. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some guests thought it was a mistake. Others froze in realization. Liam's confident smile faltered. Candace's laughter died mid-air, replaced by unease she could not explain. And I stood there, the perfect wife, calm, poised, composed. The woman who had been underestimated, who had endured betrayal, who had hidden her growing power in plain sight. And I allowed a single thought to cross my mind. The whole room thought I was humiliated. They had no idea I was hours away from winning. For the first time in years, I felt the full weight of control. Every lie exposed, every deception accounted for, every act of betrayal about to meet consequence. What would you do if the world watched someone betray you in front of everyone? Would you break or rise? Subscribe now and comment your location. If you don't, imagine the pain being witnessed, and no one standing to protect you, and no one seeing the justice you deserve. The party ended, the guests departed, and the lights dimmed. Outside, the city breathed quietly under the night sky, unaware that in one apartment, a quiet revolution was unfolding. Liam had gone to bed, drunk on confidence, blind to the network of moves I had set in motion. Candace had left hours before, smug in her perceived triumph. The children were asleep, their dreams safe for now. And I was just beginning. I moved through the apartment like a shadow, deliberate, precise. Screens glowed in the dark, passwords entered with practiced accuracy. Bank notifications blinked to life, shares were transferred, accounts locked. Every step I took was silent, untraceable, irreversible. Legal documents were signed electronically. Lawyers received instructions timed to the second. Financial institutions shifted assets according to plans Liam could never anticipate. Every corner of the empire he had built was now being touched, redirected, and controlled by me. And all the while the children slept peacefully, unaware that their mother had become a force capable of turning betrayal into liberation. Their trust had given me strength. Their innocence had given me focus. Their future had given me purpose. By the time the first notifications pinged on Liam's phone, he would wake into a nightmare of his own making, a nightmare I had quietly composed, note by note, move by move. I paused only once, breathing in the stillness of the night, letting the enormity of what I had done sink in, not arrogance, not cruelty, only a clarity born of years of loyalty betrayed and patience endured. This was justice, not public spectacle, not angry confrontation, but a reckoning designed to balance the scales that had been tipped by deceit. And as the night stretched toward dawn, I reflected on the path that had brought me here, the beggar children I took in, the love that had shaped them, the betrayal that had ignited my resolve. Everything led to this moment. Every act of kindness, every silent observation, every careful step in the shadows. And Liam, he would never see it coming. He would never understand how the woman he underestimated had quietly become the architect of his downfall. You think you're powerless? Think again. Subscribe now and drop your city. If you don't, imagine waking one day to realize that the people you trusted have quietly stolen everything from you, and no one is there to save you. Sunlight spilled into the apartment, warm and ordinary, oblivious to the chaos that had been set in motion hours before. Liam awoke slowly, the first signs of his arrogance still clinging to his mind. But the moment he reached for his phone, the first wave of reality hit. Notifications blinked insistently, accounts frozen, transfers completed, assets redirected, business lines severed, every investment he had once counted on, vanished into paths he could not trace. Candace, who had returned briefly to gloat in her perceived victory, froze as she realized the empire she had thought she could step into was crumbling beneath her feet. She looked at Liam, disbelief and panic etched across her face. Every whispered promise she had made him, every secret she had shared, had led her to this precipice. Liam screamed, not just in anger, but in terror, in the raw panic of someone who suddenly understood the consequences of underestimating the woman he had betrayed. The house, once filled with music and laughter, now echoed with silence and fear. I watched from the shadows of the morning, calm, composed, the architect of every move. For the first time, Liam understood betrayal, not as theory, not as suspicion, but as a lived, irreversible reality. And in that understanding, I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. The children were safe, the past accounted for, and the future, finally free from the chains he had tried to bind me with. You think you're powerless? Think again. Subscribe now and drop your city. If you don't, one day you may wake to betrayal with no one left to stop it, and every second of silence will be your regret. Weeks passed. The divorce was finalized quietly, legally, without spectacle, but every signature carried the weight of consequences long overdue. The empire Liam had assumed was untouchable remained intact, but now in my hands. The children thrived. Naomi's laughter returned fully, light and unguarded. Isaiah walked with quiet confidence, his protective instincts softened by the safety of our home. Caleb simply smiled, a small boy with a large heart, finally free from fear. I moved into my penthouse, overlooking a city that had once seemed indifferent to my struggles. From that height, I could see everything, not with arrogance, but with perspective. Every choice I had made, every risk, every sleepless night, had led to this moment. Freedom, not just for me, but for the family I had built and protected. Liam tried once more to reach me. His voice, strained and broken, filled the air with words he had no right to utter. Apologies, pleas, offers to negotiate. But I had grown beyond needing his validation. I did not respond. I walked away, each step a declaration. I would no longer be bound by anyone else's lies or betrayals. And Candace, she vanished from our lives, her ambitions shattered quietly, leaving only the echo of arrogance turned to dust. Yet even in this new life, I remained vigilant. I had learned that trust must be earned, that power must be respected, and that the smallest kindness carries weight far beyond its size. I built new business contracts, nurtured old friendships, and forged alliances that ensured the future would be secure. At night, I would sit by the window, the city lights shimmering below, and reflect. The beggar children I had once taken in were now my legacy. They had saved me as much as I had saved them. Every life I touched, every choice I made, had created a chain of consequences, some bitter, some sweet, but all undeniable. I realized then, with a clarity that only time and struggle bring, betrayal had not destroyed me. Betrayal had forged me, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and utterly free. Now it's your turn. Subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. If you don't, then tell me why. Silence is just another way of surrendering, and I will know who gave up. Because freedom and power are only claimed by those willing to fight, even when no one is watching. But the story was far from over. There were whispers from the past, shadows of old betrayals, and opportunities still hidden in plain sight. And as I stood in the glow of my newfound life, I knew this was only the beginning of a journey that would test every lesson I had learned, and reveal just how far my power could reach. Even in the quiet of her penthouse, Elizabeth could feel it. A presence, faint but insistent. Whispers of the past crept through her life like a chill she couldn't shake. The world may have seen her as victorious, untouchable, free, but she knew better. Power always attracts attention, and where there is power, Envy follows. A message arrived that chilled her blood. No sender, no signature, just a single line. You think it's over. You're only just beginning to see the cost of what you've done. Elizabeth's mind raced. Had Liam somehow survived beyond the wreckage of his empire? Was Candace plotting revenge from the shadows? Or was it someone entirely unexpected, someone who had been watching quietly, waiting for the right moment to strike? She realized that victory is never final, and that freedom, fragile and fleeting, can become a target for those who resent your rise. She called Janet immediately. Together they began retracing old steps, scanning for patterns, following threads that had once been buried. Every document, every email, every phone call could hold the key to the new threat lurking just beyond her vision. The children remained blissfully unaware, their laughter echoing down the halls of a home that had known too much pain. And Elizabeth, for the first time in months, felt that strange weight again, the tension of a storm she could neither see nor fully prepare for. She realized then that life's battles are never truly won. They are merely survived, one careful move at a time. And the next move would have to be perfect. Have you ever thought your victories were complete, only to discover danger hiding quietly in the shadows? Subscribe now and tell me your city. If you don't, imagine the consequences of a threat you didn't see coming, while the people who could save you stayed silent. The past was calling, and this time it wouldn't wait quietly. Something, or someone, was coming, and Elizabeth had no choice but to prepare for a challenge unlike any she had faced before. Weeks passed with an uneasy calm. Elizabeth monitored everything with a precision born from experience. Every email scanned, every phone notification logged, every financial transfer checked twice. Then, one morning she discovered an anomaly, a series of subtle manipulations in her accounts, minor but deliberate. Someone was testing her, probing the defenses she had built so meticulously. The handwriting of the threat was invisible, its identity unclear. Liam, Candace, or a stranger skilled enough to challenge her from the shadows? Elizabeth felt the familiar rush of tension, but also a strange exhilaration. Every challenge, every risk was a test of her skill, a puzzle waiting to be solved. And Elizabeth had always thrived when the stakes were highest. She organized meetings with Janet, plotted contingencies, and even began teaching the children subtly about vigilance and awareness. Not fear, not paranoia, but readiness. Naomi, curious and clever, asked one afternoon, "Mom, how do you always know what to do?" Elizabeth smiled, looking out the window at the sprawling city below. "Because I watch, I listen, and I never let someone else control what's mine." Yet, as the sun set and the lights of the city blinked on, Elizabeth understood something critical. The unseen enemy had the advantage of surprise, and in the coming days, that advantage could become dangerous. Do you ever feel safe, only to realize someone is quietly undermining you? Subscribe now and tell me your city. If you don't, imagine losing everything you've rebuilt to a threat you never saw coming, and no one there to protect you. The chessboard had expanded, new players were in motion, and Elizabeth's next move would determine whether freedom remained hers or slipped away forever. Elizabeth sensed it before it arrived, a subtle shift in the air, a tension in her carefully ordered world. Janet had uncovered evidence that someone had accessed her private files, leaving digital fingerprints almost invisible. Minor breaches, subtle manipulations of transactions, small but deliberate, enough to test her vigilance, enough to taunt her. She moved quickly, tracing every thread, following the anomalies like a bloodhound tracking a scent. The deeper she went, the more she realized that this wasn't just a test, it was a challenge. Someone was daring her to respond, and she would respond. Every step of the night, Elizabeth monitored her empire. Security cameras, account alerts, even the slightest unexpected call, all were scanned. Her home, her assets, her family, all were under protection she had built with painstaking care. Yet even with preparation, a part of her knew that the unseen enemy had already studied her, learned her rhythms, and was moving pieces into place that could not yet be seen. It was a silent game, and the stakes were higher than ever. The children, once a symbol of innocence, had now become a silent reminder of what she must protect. Naomi, Isaiah, Caleb, they trusted her completely, unaware that the shadow lurking over their lives was testing every boundary she had created. And in the quiet of the night, Elizabeth realized the gravity of her situation. The victory she had celebrated, the empire she had reclaimed, and the freedom she had fought so hard to secure, were now in danger again. But Elizabeth had learned one thing above all: control is not about fear. Control is about preparation, patience, and precision, and she would not allow a threat, visible or invisible, to undo everything she had built. Do you feel prepared for the threats you don't see? Subscribe now and drop your city. If you don't, imagine everything you fought for slipping through your fingers while no one is there to warn you. The trap had been set. The unseen enemy was moving. And Elizabeth understood one terrifying truth: she would have to outsmart them completely, or risk losing everything once again. Days blurred into nights as Elizabeth stayed alert, orchestrating her defenses while maintaining the illusion of calm. Every call, every email, every financial transaction was scrutinized, double-checked, and fortified. Then a message arrived, clear, deliberate, and chilling. You've survived this long, but the end game is near. Elizabeth's pulse quickened, but fear did not touch her. She knew the stakes, she knew the shadows she faced, and she knew that action, not panic, would decide the outcome. Janet worked tirelessly alongside her, following leads, uncovering clues, and preparing contingencies. They traced the threat to a series of accounts, a network of contacts, and subtle manipulations that could topple her carefully rebuilt empire if left unchecked. And Elizabeth realized something crucial. Whoever this was, they were clever, but they underestimated her resilience, her strategy, and her willingness to fight for what was hers. The children, still unaware, moved through their days with innocence preserved. Naomi, curious as always, asked questions about decisions Elizabeth made. She would receive only careful, measured answers, lessons in vigilance and awareness that were now essential for survival. Elizabeth understood that the confrontation she had long anticipated, the one that would determine whether her life remained hers, was coming closer. And when it arrived, there would be no room for error, no second chances, and no mercy for those who sought to undo her. And yet, beneath the tension, a thrill ran through her, a knowledge that she had faced betrayal before, and she had survived. This was simply another battle, and Elizabeth was ready. Do you have the courage to face threats quietly waiting in the shadows? Subscribe now and tell me your city. If you don't, one day you may wake to discover your life has been quietly taken, and no one will be there to help you reclaim it. The confrontation was coming. The unseen enemy was closer than she imagined, and Elizabeth had only one choice: strike first, or risk losing everything she had fought for. Elizabeth knew the moment had arrived. Every warning, every anomaly, every subtle manipulation she had tracked over the past weeks led to this instant. The enemy, careful, invisible, relentless, was finally revealing themselves. She watched from her penthouse office as alerts blinked across multiple screens. Each signal was precise, deliberate, a challenge issued directly to her. It was a test of skill, strategy, and resolve, and Elizabeth welcomed it. For years, she had learned to move unseen, to strike without warning, to anticipate every deceit before it had a chance to grow. And now, the board was set. Pieces aligned, every trap, every contingency, every silent move, ready for execution. Janet stood at her side, eyes sharp, fingers tracing the map of threats. "They're clever," she said, "but they've underestimated you." Elizabeth nodded. "That's always the case. she replied. Calm, measured, unshaken. The enemy made the first move, small, deliberate testing reactions. A subtle withdrawal of funds here, a misdirection there, an attempt to unsettle her confidence. But Elizabeth had anticipated it. Every move was countered, every vulnerability reinforced. And in the quiet of the night, she realized the truth. Control was not about preventing the enemy from acting. Control was about predicting, manipulating, and turning their aggression into their undoing. The children slept peacefully above, unaware that their mother was now facing the greatest test of her life. Naomi, Isaiah, and Caleb had never seen her falter, and tonight would be no different. Elizabeth's mind raced through strategies, options, and contingencies. Each possible outcome weighed carefully, each possible risk neutralized before it could strike, and then the final clue appeared, a signature, a pattern, a detail the enemy had overlooked. Elizabeth leaned back, a faint smile crossing her face. The board was clear, the pieces were predictable. The trap was theirs, not hers. The unseen enemy had revealed themselves through arrogance, through overconfidence, through a single detail that betrayed their presence. Elizabeth had only to act, and she would do so with precision. Do you recognize the power of anticipation, patience, and strategy? Subscribe now and tell me your city. If you don't, imagine facing a threat quietly dismantling your life while you remain blind to the danger and powerless to stop it. Elizabeth waited. Patience had always been her greatest weapon, and tonight it would prove unstoppable. The enemy's movements were predictable now. Arrogance had exposed their patterns. Every subtle misstep, every whisper of overconfidence, every trace left behind had been catalogued and turned against them. She moved in silence, executing the plan she had crafted meticulously. Accounts were frozen before they could be accessed. Communications rerouted. Every thread the enemy had pulled was quietly redirected, snaring them in a net of their own making. And in the quiet of the night, Elizabeth watched as the first consequences took hold. The enemy's control, so carefully wielded, began slipping through their fingers. Frustration flared. Panic whispered in their ears, and for the first time, they understood the cost of underestimating her. Janet reported every small victory: a transfer reversed, an access denied, a lie exposed. Elizabeth absorbed each update calmly, her mind already moving several steps ahead. She thought of the beggar children she had once taken in, the family she had rebuilt, and the life she had protected through decades of unseen effort. Every act of kindness, every sacrifice, every sleepless night had led to this moment, when cunning met opportunity, and power could be wielded without mercy. And as the enemy scrambled, trying desperately to regain control, Elizabeth realized the final truth. No one could challenge her who had not first walked the path of betrayal, perseverance, and absolute clarity. The city outside slept, unaware of the silent war waging in its heart. But within those walls, victory was taking shape. The enemy, once confident, was now ensnared. And Elizabeth, the quiet strategist, watched as the balance of power shifted irrevocably. And still, she did not celebrate, not yet. There was always the unknown, the shadow lurking beyond the reach of her eyes. She had learned to respect it, to prepare for it, and to strike decisively when the moment arrived. Tonight, that moment had arrived, and with it came the knowledge that the life she had fought to reclaim would not just survive, it would thrive, because she had ensured it. Have you ever faced a threat you didn't see coming? Subscribe now and drop your city. If you don't, imagine watching your life crumble in silence while no one is there to defend you, and every second of hesitation costs you more than you can bear. Elizabeth thought she had accounted for everything, every move anticipated, every risk measured, every possible betrayal countered. And yet, a single anomaly appeared, subtle and almost invisible at first. A message, a meeting, a movement, something that did not fit the pattern she had studied so carefully. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with a surge of awareness. The game was far from over. Someone, somewhere, had anticipated her anticipation. Someone had observed her carefully, quietly, and was now introducing a variable she had not considered. Her carefully constructed empire, her perfected defenses, her sense of control, suddenly, it felt like a fragile illusion. Not because she lacked power, but because the world was vast and ambition limitless. Janet appeared beside her, eyes wide with concern. "Elizabeth, there's something you need to see," she said, sliding a tablet across the table. Elizabeth examined it carefully. There, in a series of subtle transactions and encrypted communications, was a network she had never traced, a presence she had never detected. Someone was moving strategically, quietly, a shadow operating outside the lines she had drawn. For the first time in months, Elizabeth felt the thrill of uncertainty. Not danger, uncertainty. The kind that sharpens the mind, stretches the senses, and tests every lesson learned in the fires of betrayal. She realized then, fully and without hesitation, that the battle she had fought was only the beginning. The unforeseen twist was a reminder that no victory is ever permanent, no freedom absolute, and no power unquestioned. The children, blissfully unaware, continued their routines. Naomi laughed, Isaiah practiced quietly, and Caleb dreamed peacefully. Their lives depended on Elizabeth's focus, on her ability to adapt and strike with precision. And she would adapt, she would strike, and she would survive. But the world had reminded her with this twist. Even the most meticulously crafted plan can encounter forces beyond comprehension, and now the stakes were higher than ever before. Elizabeth stood by the window, looking out over the city lights. Each flicker, each shadow, each distant movement was a reminder. Vigilance is the price of freedom, and mastery requires constant awareness. Somewhere out there, the new player in her life's game was watching, waiting, and planning. And Elizabeth, calm but alert, knew that the next move would define the future entirely. Do you think you can prepare for the unexpected? Subscribe now and tell me your city. If you don't, imagine a threat quietly unraveling your life, while you remain blind, helpless, and unable to reclaim control. Elizabeth did not panic. Panic was a luxury for those unprepared. She had faced betrayal before, had survived deception, had transformed humiliation into power. Now, a new force had entered the board. But Elizabeth had a way of seeing what others could not. Patterns emerged where chaos seemed to reign. Connections became visible where randomness had appeared. And slowly, deliberately, the identity of the new player revealed itself. It was neither Liam nor Candace. The enemy was someone else entirely, a figure from the fringes of her life, quietly observing, silently plotting, waiting for a crack to exploit. A shadow she had not noticed because she had been too focused on the obvious threats. And yet, the thrill of the hunt sparked within her. This was her element: strategy, patience, precision. Every move the enemy made, every attempt to destabilize her, was catalogued, analyzed, and countered. She knew the game better than anyone, and now the final reckoning was at hand. Janet worked alongside her, tracking the network, tracing communications, uncovering every manipulation. Step by step, they dismantled the enemy's footholds. Small victories piled upon small victories, emails intercepted, funds redirected, plans exposed before they could be executed. And through it all, Elizabeth remained calm, the calm of someone who had endured storms and emerged stronger. Her eyes scanned the city from the penthouse window, the lights below reflecting the complexity of her life, a web of choices, risks, and consequences. The children's laughter floated up from the bedrooms, a reminder of everything she was fighting to protect: freedom, safety, power. And she would protect it silently, relentlessly, and without hesitation. Finally, she identified the enemy's key weakness: arrogance disguised as control. The same flaw that had undone Liam, that had allowed Candace to overreach, now provided her the leverage she needed. She struck quietly. Not a confrontation, not a spectacle, but a series of precise, irreversible maneuvers that dismantled the threat before it could truly manifest. Every line of attack was neutralized, every risk contained, and every attempt to destabilize her carefully deflected. The enemy realized, too late, that they had underestimated her once again. And Elizabeth, as always, remained several steps ahead, calm and impenetrable. Do you think you can face threats quietly undermining your life? Subscribe now and tell me your city. If you don't, imagine losing everything silently while the world watches, and no one comes to save you. Elizabeth thought she had prepared for every contingency, accounted for every threat, and anticipated every move. And yet life has a way of surprising even the most meticulous strategist. One evening, a discreet knock echoed through her penthouse. Calm and poised, she opened the door to find a figure she had not expected, a person from her past, someone with knowledge, resources, and insight that could shift the balance entirely. Their eyes met, unspoken recognition passing between them. This was someone who had seen betrayal firsthand, who had learned to maneuver in silence, and who understood the stakes in a way few could. Elizabeth listened as the figure explained what she had already suspected: a network of subtle threats, quietly testing her empire, probing her defenses, challenging her authority. But unlike Elizabeth's previous enemies, this one offered guidance, strategy, and access to information she could not have uncovered alone. And for the first time in months, she considered collaboration, not out of necessity, but strategy. Because sometimes the greatest strength comes not from acting alone, but from knowing who to trust when the stakes are highest. They moved together quietly, analyzing patterns, uncovering hidden moves, and tracing the subtle manipulations of the unseen forces that lingered at the edges of her life. Every misstep the enemy had attempted was anticipated, neutralized, and transformed into leverage. The children remained blissfully unaware, their lives shielded by a combination of vigilance, preparation, and subtle cunning. Naomi asked questions, curious and perceptive, and Elizabeth answered in measured ways, teaching them lessons about awareness, trust, and foresight, without revealing the danger that lingered just beyond the light. And Elizabeth realized that the unexpected ally was more than a guide. They were a force multiplier, a partner who amplified her abilities, sharpened her perception, and ensured that the next moves in this game would favor her decisively. Together, they began to uncover threads that had remained hidden for months. Patterns that had once been invisible now revealed themselves with alarming clarity. Every attempt to undermine her empire, every whispered threat, every carefully concealed act of manipulation was exposed. Elizabeth smiled, the thrill of strategy rising within her. The enemy thought they had the advantage, but with this new alliance, Elizabeth's vision extended beyond what they could imagine. And in that quiet, tense night, she realized a fundamental truth. Power is not just about strength, wealth, or cunning. It is about alliances, awareness, and the ability to anticipate the unpredictable. And Elizabeth, with her new ally, held all three. Do you know who you can trust when danger approaches? Subscribe now and tell me your city. If you don't, imagine facing threats alone, while the people who could have helped remain silent. The days following the arrival of the ally were a flurry of silent investigation, meticulous tracking, and quiet anticipation. Every detail, every subtle trace, every hint that had eluded Elizabeth before now came into focus. And then finally, the veil lifted. The enemy, elusive, calculated, and dangerous, revealed themselves. Not a single figure, but a network of manipulation and ambition, orchestrated by someone who had learned the art of patience, deception, and timing. Elizabeth studied the revelations carefully, Names, connections, and motives unfolded like pieces of a puzzle she had long suspected existed but could not see. The enemy had infiltrated not through force, but through subtlety, testing, observing, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But they had underestimated one thing: Elizabeth's resolve, her patience, her ability to see patterns that others overlooked. And now, faced with their identity, she felt no fear, only clarity. The stage was set, the pieces aligned, and the outcome was hers to direct. Her ally worked silently alongside her, tracing the enemy's moves, identifying weaknesses, and mapping opportunities for decisive action. Every hidden communication, every misstep, every overreach the enemy had made was logged, analyzed, and prepared for exploitation, and Elizabeth, as always, remained several steps ahead, calm, focused, implacable. She understood that the final confrontation would not be a battle of brute force, but a clash of strategy, patience, and intellect. The city continued its oblivious rhythm below, unaware that in one penthouse a silent war was unfolding, one that would determine not just power, but survival itself. She reflected briefly on the children, Naomi, Isaiah, Caleb. They were innocent of the stakes, yet their safety was intertwined with every move she made. Every precaution, every decision, every plan protected them. And that responsibility sharpened her mind, hardened her resolve, and clarified the necessity of victory. And then, as if on cue, the enemy made their first direct attempt, a bold, unmistakable maneuver designed to test her reaction. It was a trap, but one that revealed far more than it concealed. Elizabeth smiled faintly. The enemy had walked right into her calculation. Do you know the threats hidden in plain sight around you? Subscribe now and tell me your city. If you don't, imagine the people plotting against you moving silently while you remain unaware, and every second of hesitation costs you everything. Elizabeth had waited, calculated, and prepared. Every move the enemy had made, every trap they set, every whisper in the shadows, they had all been anticipated. Tonight, the game would end. She met the enemy face to face, not with anger, not with theatrics, but with calm precision. Words were measured, strategies clear, and every action executed with the certainty of someone who had mastered patience, power, and perception. The enemy realized too late that their arrogance had betrayed them. Every effort to destabilize Elizabeth's empire, every attempt to threaten her freedom, had been anticipated and countered. Elizabeth orchestrated the final moves: legal exposure, financial containment, and the revelation of hidden manipulations that left the enemy cornered. There was no escape, no bargaining, no chance of recovery. The game was over, and Elizabeth had won. Her ally watched quietly, witnessing the culmination of months of strategy and silent warfare. Together, they had dismantled the threat not with violence, but with intellect, foresight, and unwavering resolve. Outside, the city continued its oblivious rhythm. Inside, victory was quiet but absolute. Elizabeth's empire was secure, her family safe, and her freedom unshakable. And for the first time in what felt like decades, she allowed herself to exhale fully, to let go of the tension that had kept her vigilant, alert, and unrelenting. The battle had been long, the stakes enormous, but she had emerged victorious. Weeks passed, and life returned to a rhythm of peace, purpose, and promise. Elizabeth rebuilt her empire not in secrecy, but openly, with integrity and precision, never forgetting the lessons of betrayal, perseverance, and vigilance. The children thrived, unburdened by fear, carrying with them the lessons of awareness and courage their mother had silently instilled. Naomi laughed freely, Isaiah moved with confidence, and Caleb's gentle presence reminded Elizabeth of the power of love and protection. Elizabeth walked through her penthouse, overlooking the city that had once seemed indifferent, and felt a sense of mastery, not over others, but over herself. Freedom was hers, not the freedom of avoiding pain, but the freedom of surviving it, transforming it, and rising above it. Liam, Candace, and the enemies who had tried to undo her now existed only as lessons in the past, reminders of the resilience, foresight, and intelligence that Elizabeth had cultivated over decades. And as the sun set over the city skyline, Elizabeth understood a truth deeper than victory itself. Betrayal had not destroyed her. It had forged her, and now, at last, she was utterly free. Your life can be reshaped, your freedom reclaimed, your power awakened, but only if you act. Subscribe now and tell me where you're watching from. If you don't, imagine standing by as betrayal and silence steal what could have been yours. Don't surrender. Take control. Begin now.